An Iron Will, Lesson 1, Training the Will. Welcome to the first lesson. Now this class is going to teach you how to build an iron will and make yourself practically unstoppable. Fear, criticism, and almost any kind of setback won't even matter because you'll be able to keep going and chase down your dreams no matter what. An obstacle that might be a brick wall to lesser people will be little more than a speed bump to you, and that's the power of having an iron will. There's one thing I'd like you to do before you start. That is, make a wish. One of the most important secrets to building an iron will is to have a burning desire to have something, to do something, to be something. Let's look at why this is true. You have to have a reason for taking this class, a reason for developing an iron will. Your desire for something will make your will stronger. And then as your will gets stronger, you'll have the power to fulfill anything you desire. So let's get started. In the first chapter, Martin mentions the concept of this thing called a reservoir of power. And he tells a story about something that happened nearly 100 years ago when a Unitarian minister named Thomas Starr King first went and saw the giant redwoods of California. And he writes, "It was the thought of the reserve energies that had been compacted into them that stirred me. The mountains had given them their iron and rich stimulants. The hills had given them their soil. The clouds had given their rain and snow. And 1,000 summers and winters had poured forth their treasures about their vast roots." Now, Martin's really big on this idea that all the things that come to you in life kind of give you this reservoir of power. You store up, the same way a tree stores up the nutrients and the elements that come to it, you store up your experiences. And you can make this a deliberate thing. Martin is passionate about the need to build your own reserve of energy, and he calls this the reservoir of power. He says, "Nobody can hope to do anything above the commonplace if you have not made your life a reservoir of power on which you can constantly draw, which will never fail you in any emergency. Be sure that you have stored away in your powerhouse the energy, the knowledge that will be equal to the great occasion when it comes." For the rest of the book, he never mentions the reservoir of power directly, but it's always kind of there in the background. This reservoir of power, I think of it as being similar to the martial arts idea of ki or chi, and this is something you build up through constant exercise and self-discipline. And that's really what the rest of this book is about. In the very first chapter also, Martin says, and I'm quoting him here, "The achievements of history have been the choices, the determinations, the creations of the human will." Now he tells a story, to give an example of the power of will. He tells a story of a young Greek farmer who promised his father he would win a marathon. His father told him, "Don't come home unless you are a victor." Now this young man, he grew up on a farm. He was used to hard physical work, so he was probably in pretty good shape. But he had never had any formal training. He never worked with a coach. He probably didn't have the best shoes. And yet he went out and did this race, and he outdistanced all his competitors by so much that it was just a stunning victory, and people were overwhelmed, and crowds, strangers were cheering for him, and he became a hero. And the only thing he had going for him was the determination to win no matter what. Now this book is full of examples of people who have made great fortunes, earned fame and honor for themselves, while accomplishing things that changed life on earth for millions of people. And Martin points out the common thread of all these people. He says, "They can no more be stopped than the sun can be, or the tide." Most men fail, says Martin, not through lack of education or agreeable personalities, but from lack of dogged determination, from the lack of a dauntless will. Now this is good news because you can train the will and build your will like a muscle until you are a force of nature, unstoppable like the sun or the tides. It is impossible to underestimate how much really depends upon the extent to which the willpower is cultivated, strengthened, and made operative in right directions. Young people need to go into training for it. We live in an age of athletic meets. Those who are determined to have athletic willpower must take for it the kind of exercise they need. Now, this idea of athletic willpower, I think, is critical because it points out you can train the will. You can train yourself to have a stronger will, just like you can train yourself to be better at almost any sport or other physical activity. And so, starting today, starting now, no matter what your background is, I want you to think of yourself as an athlete. You are training your willpower just as a basketball player would build her shooting skills or soccer star would work on speed and stamina. You are an athlete. and you're training for the most desperate competition in the world. You're training for life. The athlete trains for his race, and the mind must be put into training if one will win life's race. So how do you train your will? The book says it is only by continued strenuous efforts, repeated again and again, day after day, week after week, and month after month, that the ability can be acquired to fasten the mind to one subject, however abstract or naughty, to the exclusion of everything else. The process of obtaining the self-mastery, this complete command of one's mental powers, is a gradual one. Its length varies with each person, but its acquisition is worth infinitely more than the utmost labor it ever costs. Now you're going to work really hard over the next 7 weeks, but the benefits you'll reap, the lifelong power of your iron will, is going to be worth infinitely more than the effort you'll put in. So what does a trained will look like? Well, in one word, it's about concentration. The mental reservoir of most people is like a leaky dam. That's something Martin likes to say in his book. One of the secrets of a successful life is to be able to hold all of our energies upon one point, to focus all of the scattered rays of the mind upon one place or thing. So how do you build this concentration? By constant repeated use and practice. The way to learn to develop willpower is by the actual exercise of willpower in the business of life. The forth-putting of willpower is a means of strengthening willpower. The will becomes strong by exercise. To stick to a thing till you are a master is a test of intellectual discipline and power. Now remember, at the end of this lesson, you're going to get some exercises to cultivate your will. This will happen at the end of every lesson. And it's really important that you carry out these exercises, because if you just watch this video, you're going to learn a little bit about how to build a will, but you won't actually get a stronger will. It's through the exercises, through doing things, through constant practice and use that you build your willpower. But also, in addition to the exercises, in general, you should try to exercise your willpower as often as possible, in as many ways as possible. Because it's just like any muscle, it will get stronger with use. So here's the upshot of this first lesson. Remember that your will is the key to accomplishing almost anything. Now you may have heard of things such as improving your self-image, building self-esteem. There's techniques such as neurolinguistic programming, self-hypnosis. But at the end of the day, it's an obstacle. An obstacle is an obstacle. And while there are hundreds of tools that can make it easier for you to overcome that obstacle, you still have to just push yourself and go through it and go over it. And that's why having a will at some point is going to be key to accomplishing almost anything. Second main point of this video is that you can train the will and make it stronger. And we talked about the exercises, you'll see them in a minute, but remember, it's all about training your will. Finally, remember, you build an iron will by constant repeated use and effort. Do the exercises, but also keep thinking of yourself as an athlete. Push yourself and challenge yourself, and always be looking for times when you can test your will, and do that. Start using your will, and the more you use it, the stronger it's going to get, just like any muscle. So that's it for lesson 1. Take a look at the exercises, and pretty soon you're going to build yourself an iron will.